I've been trying to get around paying the New Yorker to look at John Updike's story Incest. So I pulled up a couple of articles that give some excerpts from that story, and I'm going to try to talk about a few things. So first of all, again, this is a short story called Incest, is what I'm speaking of. It was written by John Updike and published in the New Yorker back in 1957. And so there are a few things I want to point out. And it just so happened that there are some very pertinent excerpts that this person took from that story and put in their article here. This first one is talking about the main character from the story, Lee, as he's interacting with his young daughter. She's maybe about 3 years old and with very light blonde hair. So it says here, with 2 sheets of typing paper, using one as a brush and the other as a pan, he cleaned up what she had spilled on the counter, reaching around her since she kept her position standing on the chair. Her breath floated randomly, like a butterfly, on his forearms as he swept. Like a butterfly. So I have said in, I believe, some of my first blog posts on Celebrity Reigns List blog about this cult. And I've said, I believe in a few videos that I posted to my YouTube channel in the past, that there is a very strong connection between young girls, butterflies, and, this cult, their belief system. And usually pedophilia. So actually, I can give you another example of that. Let's just look at FBI, pedophile symbols. So the FBI released... Here we go. Released some symbols that they know are commonly used by pedophile networks. If this thing would like to catch up with me. Let's try this one. Alright, technical difficulties. Oh my goodness, seriously? There we go. So here are a few of those symbols that are frequently used, and you can see here on the far left is a butterfly that's wings are made out of hearts. That's usually synonymous, I think, with girls more than with boys. It's used more for young girl lovers than young boy lovers, as is, I believe, the spiral heart here, whereas you will see more blue spiral and spiral upward pointing triangles used by boy lovers. But I think to some degree they could probably be used interchangeably. You're getting, for the most part, the idea across that this person likes children. They're getting the idea across to other pedophiles. It also, I believe, relates to... Let me see if I can find... no. Something here. Tesla 369. Here we go. Perfect. This is perfect. So pay attention to this, guys. Nikola Tesla, he was a brilliant scientist and inventor and just an all-around brilliant mind who studied really energy to figure out basically what made it work. So note here, he was obsessed with the numbers 3, 6, and 9. And if you can see here, it's charted out on this wheel, on this circle, and they make this upward pointing triangle. That is the male phallic symbol. But what about the other numbers here? If you chart out the other numbers, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8, and connect those, it makes something that looks very much like either a W, or you could say it looks sort of like a butterfly, the wings of a butterfly. So, woman, butterfly, girl, butterfly. Also, I believe it looks very much, it very closely resembles the pelvic bone. So, female pelvis. I understand that they look very... The male and female look very similar, but there are some differences. So, think about that, guys. You have sort of a pelvic bone here, female pelvic bone, that looks very much like a butterfly, but also there we go. And you've got the male phallic symbol, the upward pointing triangle, going up through going up through what looks very much like a female pelvic symbol there, or a butterfly symbol. So again, it's this idea of bringing together two opposites. Remember, the abrasic stands for bringing together two opposites. Remember, I have made so many videos at this point pointing out how these guys worship the abrasics and how they reference the abrasics in their content that they create, their books, their music, their videos. And so you can see that the top of the abrasics is a rooster's head, and the bottom of the abrasics is typically snake legs. So those represent two opposites. Rooster is like the sun and air, sky. It's more masculine energy. And the snakes at the bottom would represent more water, earthy, feminine energies. Yeah, so again, this deity is a Gnostic deity. It represents creation and destruction, flip sides of the same coin. It also represents the bringing together of two opposites, which is essentially the idea behind making magic. That's all it takes to make well, that's a big part, it's a big element of making magic, is bringing together two opposites. And again, let me remind you that I believe these people practice that in extreme ways. So it's not just husband, wife, man, and woman. They try to practice it, if they try to make the extremes even more extreme by going with, dirty old man and innocent little girl. All right? So the idea being, if you make the opposites more extreme, then when you bring them together, it should give you like a bigger bang, I think. It also is aligned with this idea of, I mentioned in the last Updike video, if you are monotheistic and you think that all things came from one God or one deity, one energy, well, that energy, the idea is it split itself into two. The one split itself into two, and then the two opposites, the two extreme opposites, and those two commingled to make a sort of a balance of life and magic. All of life is essentially magic, in a way. Well, if you believe that, and you're inclined to personify those energies, if you are inclined to give them human traits, the first two energies created from the one, and you believe that they were split into two extreme opposites, well, then you might believe that they were split into old man and little girl, something along those lines. We also see this sort of in a story of Shiva and Shakti. Shakti being I think the oldest version of that story is Shakti was the first one. She was the first deity, and then she created a consort for herself, sort of her son / husband, Shiva. But Shiva was repulsed by how hideous and ugly she was. So she created sort of a softer, more agreeable version of herself to partner with Shiva. So again, that aligns with this idea of it started with one energy. The energy was probably more female, woman, split itself into two, and those two extreme opposites very possibly were very much like an old pervy man and an innocent little girl. Again, I'm just trying to lay out for you guys what I think the mindset is of this cult, a cult of men and women, but I think primarily dominated by men, that like to engage in incest and child abuse and child trafficking. And because they are of the quote-unquote aristocracy, because they're well-educated, they come from well-resourced backgrounds, they have the time and leisure to come up with a belief system or work a belief system around what's possibly kind of true, right? But we're talking about ancient energies, all right? We're not talking about human beings. There's a big gap between the first energies that ever created life and us. Perhaps we were the point they were trying to get to, but because there is such a large gap there, I think that there are some things that we're not supposed to do that possibly they do. But again, I think also these people, a big part of the idea behind what they're doing is trying to embody the gods. And if you believe that the gods are committing incest with each other, well, again, it's just another thing to support your predilections. It's just another belief system. So again, sorry, let me circle back to, we started off with John Updike. So remember, we have Tesla here. This is something you can easily do. You can map this out to make the Rodin's coil. And you can see that the male essence is made up of 369 that creates that upward pointing triangle. And then the other numbers, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8, create this more feminine shape that it looks like more of a W and or a butterfly and or the female pelvis, human pelvis. And let's go back to Updike here. Where were we? Here we go. So again, I do think that John Updike was very much a part of this cult while he was alive. And you can see these little hints being dropped in the work of these people, in the videos that they make, in the books and stories that they write, in the music that they create, in their album covers for their music. And here we have one example that I just pointed out to you. John Updike is basically connecting the butterfly symbol with a little girl. And again, we have down here, don't forget that pedophiles love to use butterflies to represent themselves or, what they're into. And I don't know why that's being naughty, but I'm just going to leave it. So let's come down here. I don't think there was much I wanted to cover on this one, that excerpt. Here we go. And for this excerpt, Lee, again, the main character of Updike's story, Incest, this man who's married, who has a young girl, he lays in bed at night and he plays this sort of game to try to get himself to fall asleep. And in this game, he's basically trying to think of as many people as he can, as he's ever heard of, I guess, who have a name that starts with the letter G. So he's going down the list here. Senator Albert Gore, Benny Goodman, Constance Garnett, David Garnett, Edvard Grieg. I'm not gonna. Oh, and who do we have here? Goethe. Goethe. Goethe was Wolfgang. There we go. So I have mentioned him in a few videos in the past. This guy, and remember, I keep saying that the people in this cult, they reference certain figures. They reference Carl Jung a lot. They have such a hard-on for Carl Jung. But they also reference Goethe here, Goethe. So Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, a lot. And this guy was well known to be a pedophile. And also a color theorist. So that's important. His theory on color, I believe that they use that a lot in their beliefs, in how they manifest their beliefs, how they sort of display what they believe. They use his color theory. So right there, we've got two excerpts already from this story. One likening a little girl to a butterfly, or connecting her to a butterfly, her breath. So something coming from her mouth, really connecting a little girl's mouth, something that's in and out of her mouth, with a butterfly. All right? And we also have a name drop right here of a pedophile. A well-known pedophile who I see his name being dropped by these people a lot. And I don't think that there were any other excerpts in this one that I wanted to go over. There's something else I wanted to point out. Something that speaks, I think, more to the psychology of this character and of these people in general. Let's see. Here we go. In this passage here, it talks about how Lee and his wife, after they put the little girl to bed, they are sitting up reading. And Lee says here he reads straight through the Jonesbury section of F.O. Matthiesen's Anthology of American Poetry. And while she reads only one page of Swan's Way and falls asleep. Think about that, guys. So, for me, what's jumped out to me about that is he can read a lot of poetry, a big section of poetry, which is supposed to be very, well, poetry is often fraught with emotions, and it's also quite often supposed to make you think quite a bit about what the person is trying to relate to you in the poetry. And he's reading probably a good deal of poetry here, and it said he read a whole section of poetry in an anthology. All right, in roughly, what was it, probably about an hour's time, 1 to 2 hours time, he reads a whole section of poetry, and in that same amount of time she only reads one page of Swan's Way. Now, granted, Swan's Way is, I have not read it, but I've heard that it is difficult to read. So we can say that we can mark that down, I guess, as being one reason why it might have taken her a long time to get through only one page. But it doesn't explain, I doubt very much that Jonesbury poetry is super easy to digest. What I think is going on here more likely is this is pointing out very much, I think, the difference in the psychology between a male and a female. To some degree. Females get way more into the stuff that we read, typically. We're empathizing. We're putting ourselves there in our imagination. So quite often, that's going to take us a lot longer to read through something. Whereas if you're sort of coming at the material you're reading in a very sort of shallow-minded way, let's say, you're not really empathizing with it. You're not really thinking about it too much. You're just sort of consuming it, which I think is more the male psychology there, and or very much, at the very least, it's more narcissistic. So a narcissist will not necessarily just be, taken over with the material they're reading. They won't necessarily just dive in and practically live in it. They won't be as emotionally attached. Whereas females who tend to be less narcissistic than males, they tend to get very much into what they're reading. They practically are living it with the characters. So I do think that's sort of what's going on here is Lee, in this story, John Updike is sort of giving us a window into their minds to some degree and showing us that Lee is somewhat narcissistic here. He can just sort of consume an entire section on American poetry in a very short period of time, and it doesn't seem as if he's thought about it too much or is really diving into it. Not like his wife is with Swan's Way. So that's something I wanted to point out about this character. And I will tell you guys that in this story, John Updike does not really give anything too graphic or detailed about any incest between the man Lee and his little girl. Really, it's about he's spending his day daydreaming about a girl who's in her early teens. And you can tell by the physical description of that girl that it's almost certainly his young daughter when she grows up to be in her early teens. So he's fantasizing about having sexual encounters with a somewhat older version of his daughter. All right? And I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to go over here. No, I think for now, I'm just trying to get some, hopefully I'll do a better version of this with better organized examples. But yeah, I just wanted to point out some, I think that, again, so often I see these dudes reference Goethe, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, or Goethe here, who was a well-known pedophile. They reference this guy a lot. They reference Carl Jung a lot, who wrote about the Abrasics. And again, he's making that connection between a little girl and her mouth and her breath and a butterfly. Nabokov, Vladimir Nabokov, guys, who wrote Lolita, probably the most famous book ever written about a pedophile. He loved butterflies and moths, and he worked them into his writing a lot. And again, he used those as a symbol as well, very much so, connecting them with girls, with young girls. And just to go over these things again really quickly, little reminders. Oh my goodness, why? So again, butterflies, commonly used symbol by pedophile networks, even to the point of where the FBI has really, and I have identified so many more symbols that are used by these pedophile networks. The FBI just has this handful of symbols that they've released, right? But that should tell you how common these specific symbols are, is that even the FBI, those dodos, are like, yeah, these are definitely, we can't deny. These are symbols used by pedophiles. But if they knew as many symbols as I know, they'd have sheets and sheets beyond just like these two sheets of paper explaining some of these symbols, right? They would have the Abrasics on there. They would have quite a few things. And again, we'll see how it connects. Tesla, they like Tesla a lot too. Again, I'm investigating Elon Musk as being a part of this network. He's lower on my list though, just by virtue of the fact that I identified him later on. I knew of him, but I identified him as being part of this cult later on. I picked up on it. The way I picked up on Elon Musk was by seeing how his Grimes, his ex-girlfriend Grimes, how she would dress for a lot of their public engagements, as if she was being dressed up to again, they signify who they are and what they are, and that they're in this club in many ways. And one of those ways is what they wear, the color combinations of what they wear, the symbolism behind what they wear. All right, so art crosses many platforms. All right, it's not just visual, it's not just painting, it is sculpture, it is writing, it is music, it is album covers, it's also fashion, it's also the clothing we wear. So yeah, and Elon Musk obviously has that company Tesla where he makes the cars. And again, we can see the butterfly here, the upward pointing triangle, the male phallic symbol piercing through a sort of butterfly or W shape right there. It also seems to give the impression that the numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8 are more feminine numbers, perhaps, or at least they might associate these numbers with being more feminine, and associate the numbers 3, 6, and 9 with being more masculine. That's possible if they put any clout in this. Then, yeah, again, you might be inclined to say that the numbers 3, 6, 9 are more masculine numbers, and the numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8 are more feminine numbers. I'm inclined to say they're all woman, because my own personal belief is that I am a bit monotheistic, and my own personal belief is that if there was a first entity or essence or deity, it was woman. It was more of a woman than a man. And that I've already explained this, that it encompasses all things. Everything lives inside of this essence, this deity. So it encompasses male and female, right? It's right there in the word, female, all right? The word has male in it, but it's more than just male, isn't it? Yeah, there you go. Woman, it's more than just man. It has man in it, but it's more than man, right? So yeah, I would say that all of these numbers, really, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, all of these numbers can represent a woman. But perhaps males are limited in the numbers that they can have to represent them. Like you wouldn't necessarily, for example, the number 8. You probably would not associate the number 8 with masculine energies so much, because it looks very much like an hourglass shape. It looks very much like a woman's shape. All right, yeah. So pelvic bone. Female pelvic bone looks very much like that butterfly shape. And don't forget how this connects to the abrasics. The bringing together of two opposites, two extreme opposites. Hot, cold, wet, dry. Light, dark.